What would make a Stanford Ph.D., a former Wall Street quant, and a man who's built and sold 10 successful companies for nearly $500 million walk away from everything else and put a majority of his net worth into a single bet? For Fred Krueger, that bet comes with a warning. Most people are playing the wrong game, and he's here to explain why almost everyone else is set up to lose.
People have this dream that they're going to make more than 10x trading over 10 years. They don't. They don't do it. You know, day traders do not make money. 99.9% of the people will not be successful in that thing.
To him, there's only one game worth playing, and if you're not in it, you're already losing.
Bitcoin is the branded store of value that won't change. It's won the battle.
Yeah.
And, it's sort of like there have been other ketchups that were invented after Heinz ketchup. I'm not aware of any brands of ketchup other than Heinz. That's it. You know what I mean? You don't catch up with the absolute leader once the leader has gone like this. So
this is about brand dominance at a scale the financial world rarely sees. And the math he shares next could change everything you think you know about Bitcoin.
Somewhere in the next 10 years, I believe we're going to have $1 trillion of go into Bitcoin. $1 trillion going into an asset that's $2.5 trillion is going to raise the price of Bitcoin to $1 million a coin.
Guys, in this interview, you'll understand why Fred believes we've just entered the most profitable decade in Bitcoin's history, and why ignoring his call could be the most expensive decision you ever make. You don't want to miss this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Fred to the stage. Fred, welcome to the show. It's amazing to have you here. People who follow me on X know that I always repost and share your ideas. I also cover a lot of your thesis in my YouTube videos as well. Thank you for those awesome original insights that you give us. One of the things that I'd like to do up front is kind of set the stage of your thesis on crypto and kind of your idea behind between Bitcoin and altcoins, and so the audience has an idea kind of where the stage is set for the rest of this show.
All right. So where do I think? Well, first of all, I think the big innovation is Bitcoin, right? Not altcoins. I think Bitcoin is the elephant in the room, and I think it should be in anybody's portfolio. It should be 70% absolute, at the absolute minimum of what other altcoins are. So, I'm not anti-altcoin. I have a few. I do own some Solana, for example. I own a little bit of Tau,
Yeah.
No, ETH. So I'm not anti-altcoin at all. But
no, Fred?
I don't own any ETH.
Okay.
I don't own any ETH. Do you, Kyle?
I do. I have a lot of it. I've got more ETH than I have Solana. Just for context, I think that Solana will probably, in the long run, maybe, kind of disrupt ETH, just like Facebook or TikTok or X and TikTok have done to Facebook or MySpace, because they're just currently like a more kind of centralized, faster operator. Move quick and break things and figure out before the big institutions kind of go on their platforms how to make that infrastructure sturdy. And I think that but for now, I think that Ethereum, if we're placing bets here, I just think there's going to be so much demand for the Ethereum bids from institutions, just because it's like the most battle-tested thing. And I think that even though it's slow and expensive compared to Solana, I think it's still cheap and fast compared to Legacy. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it. I kind of interrupted you there.
No, I think it's legitimate, Kyle. I think I'm not going to completely disagree, and I think the stablecoin bill, that the Genius Act, that can go a number of ways, right? And we'll see where that is. But listen, I just don't spend most of my day thinking about Solana or ETH. It's
Right.
just it's a small little speculative thing for me. I spend a ton, like 80% of my waking hours thinking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And like where are we in the Bitcoin cycle, quote unquote, and is there going to be a cycle? Are we going to continue to power through? And, listen, I have a very big position, in absolute terms and just, as a percentage of my total net worth in Bitcoin. So I am, I'm sort of all in on Bitcoin as far as, the asset. And, so I think that the main thing is let's reframe, where is Bitcoin, right? Okay. And so, I think I was one of the people right before the ETF came out that I was very silent. I wasn't really so much on Twitter at all. And then when the ETF came out, I was sort of like, right before it came out, first of all, I raised my hand and I said, by the way, my name's Troy Krueger. I know you don't know me, but let me tell you, I happened to worked on Wall Street for 6 years, in the top ARB position, trading billions of dollars of bonds. And so I understand Wall Street. Okay. And I also am a Bitcoiner, and I've been a Bitcoiner for quite a while. And so I understand Bitcoin. And I said, I think I can see something that a lot of the other Bitcoiners can't see, which is how big this institutional bid's going to be for the ETF. Mm-hmm. And I sort of made the point, I said, the Bitcoiners don't like it or don't appreciate it because they're all into self-custody and they don't like Wall Street and they don't like banks and all the rest. And, they're much more interested in Lightning and, at the time, right? And they were thinking that this thing wouldn't even happen. And the Wall Streeters, I think, really underestimated it too, because they're just like, well, we've had ETFs for 20 years. This is just another ETF. Sure, it's a pretty good one, but on to the next ETF. And, now you have Tom Lee doing, the ETH, Bitmine stuff, right? So I think both groups completely underestimated what's happening. And I just sort of said, nope, this is absolutely going to be the big thing. And it's going to drive us on the next mega bull market. So that's kind of how I kind of exploded on Twitter, by just kind of articulating why I thought that was going to happen. And I think if you look back at my videos that I made back in November of 23 and in January of 24 and on, I basically sort of articulated exactly why I think there's going to be just an absolute mountain of money coming into Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin. Now, I don't doubt that there will be now that Trump's been elected, Ethereum. Well, first of all, it wasn't even clear there was going to be an Ethereum ETF. And then when it did come out, it wasn't successful. Remember? Yeah. It was, it was not successful. There will be a Solana, cash ETF. There'll be all of these things will have probably a fart coin ETF at some point.
Yeah.
Somebody's said, Fred, you want to do it? I'll give you the money. I got a vehicle. I was like, yes, I don't know. I don't want to be remembered as the guy doing the fart coin ETF, but there's going to be a bunch, but there is only one Bitcoin, right? And so the thesis on Bitcoin, from my perspective, from an institutional point of view, is you've got $150 trillion of M3 out there, pure money. Okay. That number is growing at 7% a year. That means it's doubling every 10 years. So if you add in the bonds, the bond market, and I used to be a bond arbitrage trader at Salomon Brothers, right? So that market is now $130 trillion. Okay. So you add in a few other things, you get to roughly $300 trillion of paper out there. We're not talking about stocks. We're not talking about real estate where you could denominate it. And there's $300 trillion worth of, dollar, euro, yen, and yuan paper, right? Now, $300 trillion, that's going to be $600 trillion in 10 years. It's going to be $1.2 quadrillion in 20 years. And honestly, it's statistic. That's just pure stats. That it's going up. It's never going down. Those are the rates, right? Now, if you have $1 quadrillion coming in of money, And that's really just money. It's not like assets that have to be moved. Those also can be moved. But $1 quadrillion of just pure money, some percentage of that money is going to find its way into Bitcoin. And prior to January 11th, 2024, there really wasn't a great way to invest in Bitcoin, right? First of all, it wasn't really legitimate, and it didn't have regulatory clarity, really, But then you had it's an asset that you can hold. It's not going to get you in trouble. It's not a security. It's not going to be deemed, there's not going to be any legal repercussions. BlackRock's behind it. So now you have a transformation of this kind of anarchist asset, this screw the man asset, to now being an actual institutional asset. Okay, number one. Number two, you have an easy way to hold it and really track the asset. Having an account on Coinbase is not something an average stock market investor wants to do. They do have them, some of them, but most people have accounts in brokerages like Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and that's where they hold their value. And before the ETF, we didn't have that. After the ETF, we did have that to some extent. It's still in the process of fully moving. You can't buy Bitcoin on Vanguard. You can't buy Bitcoin on Merrill Lynch. You can't buy Bitcoin on Goldman Sachs. I mean, it's really, advisors can't recommend Bitcoin really yet, So we're just at the beginning of this journey, but there is literally a sea of money. It is an absolute sea of money that is headed into Bitcoin. And it will head to some extent into other things a little bit. There'll be some carryover, some collateral moves into Ethereum, Solana, whatever. But it's going into Bitcoin. And the reason it's going into Bitcoin has nothing to do with the tech of Bitcoin. It's just Bitcoin is the branded store of value that won't change. It's won the battle.
Yeah.
And, it's sort of like there have been other ketchups that were invented after Heinz ketchup. I'm not aware of any brands of ketchup other than Heinz. That's it. You know what I mean? You don't catch up with the absolute leader once the leader has gone like this, So Bitcoin, we have, somewhere in the next 10 years, I believe we're going to have $1 trillion go into Bitcoin. $1 trillion going into an asset that's $2.5 trillion is going to raise the price of Bitcoin to $1 million a coin. And the power law, which I'm a complete adherent to, I'm a math guy by training, right? So I have a PhD in math. And so I think one of the things that no other cryptocurrency has is this power law. And it really tells you exactly how Bitcoin is evolving over time, both in terms of price, in terms of the address account holding 1,000 sats, 10,000 sats, 1 million sats, 10 million sats, amount of addresses holding a Bitcoin, amount of addresses holding 10 Bitcoin. All these things are power laws. The hash rate of Bitcoin is a power law. And the correlation coefficients that you get on these are so high, Kyle. The power law versus Bitcoin is a 96% correlation coefficient. Now, you can either have a view that I don't believe in statistics, and you can't tell the future. Future could be anything, Fred. Or you say, I do actually believe in math. I believe in statistics. And if I have a 96% correlation of going up, well, I'm gonna ride that trade, right? So to me, this is the clearest trade in all the world right now, right? Yeah. The clearest trade, which is you will probably 10x your money with really high certainty if you can stomach a you can stomach the volatility of Bitcoin, and you can write it up somewhere between 5 and 10 years from now. We're going to hit $1 million. Now, it's not going to go 20x. It's probably not going to. It's almost zero chance of it going 50x. We know we know kind of the number. It's roughly a 10x from here, and it could take 10 years to do. But that's like, from my perspective, that's an amazing return, right? Like, I don't care about flipping some meme coin and making, tripling my money overnight. I'm not interested in that. Yeah. I'm interested in placing big bets, tens of millions of dollars, right? And having those bets go up 10x, in 10 years. So that's where that's my focus. And so, everything I'm focused on is my macro thesis, and how is that macro, how do the day-to-day events change that macro thesis, right? And how do you sort of trade around that macro thesis? Right? So right now, we're right on the target trend line, right? So the target trend line is 114,000 on the power law.
Can you explain a little more the power law that you're talking about?
Yeah, so let me explain the power law. In 2013, an astrophysicist by the name of Giovanni Santosini noticed, was one of his friends said, "Giovanni, check out this thing called Bitcoin. It looks like it's exponential. It's like going up exponentially." And Giovanni said, "I don't think so." And there's a really big mathematical distinction between an exponential function and a power law function. So let's go over the different kinds of things. An exponential function is what they call a constant growth function. It's like population growth is exponential, right? Anything that's growing up money printing is exponential. It's growing up. The amount of money in the system is growing up 7% a year, right? The growth rate is constant. And the power law is different. Instead of it being 1.07 to the power n, where n is the number of years, that's how fast the money's growing, right? It is time to the power 6. Okay, so you have to change where the exponent is, right? And what that means is that you have a really high growth, but slowing down every year. So right now, the constant growth of Bitcoin on the curve is 42%. So if you model out Bitcoin, you model it out as, you say, I'm going to take the price of Bitcoin, I'm going to put it in log terms. Okay. Now I'm going to also, instead of the time being in years, I'm going to look at the time since the Genesis block. Okay. And I'm going to put that in log terms as well. So I'm looking at the log of price versus the log of time, right? Now, you will notice if you do that you get this absolute straight line. And then Bitcoin wobbles around this line, right? And that, when I saw that graph, I just was like, oh, of course, this is it. It's not like it fits the curve a little bit. It's a regression line of the log of Bitcoin price versus the log of time. Okay, which was sort of saying there's only one variable in Bitcoin price, really, is time. That's the only variable, right? And so basically what's happening with Bitcoin is people are discovering Bitcoin. There are new people coming into Bitcoin all the time. And there are people who get more and more conviction. Like, you start out, you have a little bit of conviction, you buy a little bit of Bitcoin. Then you get more conviction. You say, I'm going to double up. I'm going to put 20% of my portfolio into Bitcoin. And that 20% of your portfolio becomes 50% of your portfolio, right? And then you're like, should I sell or not? Now, so the amount of people, the amount of addresses that say have 1 million sats in them is growing like roughly the square of time. You could really high correlation, right? Like, there more and more people are just discovering this thing called Bitcoin and buying some Bitcoin. That's it, And so as more and more people come in and discover this asset, they got to compete with all the people who already have it to buy it from them. Right. So now they're bidding up the price of Bitcoin, and that price is going up like the 5.8 power of time. So that's this power law. It's a really straightforward mathematical law. You see these kind of things in physics all the time. You see these things in like the growth of cities and all this time. And it gives you a framework for order in this chaos, right? So you see that Bitcoin is going up and down. It looks like it could crash and never recover, and it keeps on recovering. But mathematically, it really follows this power law, and that's not debatable, right? This is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's only one model for Bitcoin, which is the power law. Yeah, statistically, it matches the price of Bitcoin. It's like that. It's a perfect fit. So I believe in it, and I think everybody should spend a little bit more time. Now, I understand there is a little bit of math involved, so some people who just reject it automatically because they're like, "What's a logarithm?" I don't know what a logarithm. I don't care.
Do you have a really good thread on it on your X account? Do you have a good thread on it?
I have many really good threads on it, and not only I have many. So I won't say I discovered it, but I discovered Giovanni, who had this power law. So this guy Giovanni noticed it in 2013, started publishing about it in 2018. Okay, and I found it in 2024 from other people, and then I kind of made Giovanni famous. Basically.
Is it similar to this kind of rainbow chart that we always see?
Well, it's similar in that it's mathematically correct, right?
Yeah.
So there's the rainbow chart. There was something called stock to flow. Remember about? I don't know if you remember that piece of nonsense that came out about 2019. What? No, I mean it was garbage. But like a lot of people took it very seriously, And meanwhile, the power law has been working perfectly since it was discovered in 2013. And basically what I did is I sort of said, listen, guys, I'm a math guy, but you can be too. So I want to show you how you can replicate all these data. And I can give you spreadsheets and Google Sheets, and you can look at all the data yourself. And even if you can replicate it, I think actually doing it gives you a lot more confidence in this. You know what I mean? So the power law. I basically tried to encourage everybody. Look, guys, don't take my word for it. Go reconstruct it for yourself. All you needed to do is you need to get the Bitcoin price over time, and you can derive the same results as Giovanni and me and everybody else.
Is there a good? So what I want to do for this is because I think what you're explaining right now is one way of people to build conviction, right? And for me, Bitcoin conviction was always fundamental. It was always like once I saw WikiLeaks using it to surpass or get around all these centralized powers of control, I thought, aha, okay, this is it. But that's one way, right? And people who are new haven't seen that before. Another way is from a price prediction is to also build conviction in some other mental model or whatever. So what I'd like to do, Fred, is we'll get from you maybe one or two threads that you've made that show people how to build out this power law and replicate it. And then we'll put that in the description below. Of course, we're also going to link your socials and things like that. But what I'd like to do, if you guys are watching this, is try this exercise yourself, because building conviction and understanding the potential is super important. What I'd like to do, Fred, as well is, so I have a question. You said like 1 million is programmed, and I think that's no problem, right? I think that all of us agree on that. But and you said you probably won't get a 50x on Bitcoin. Do you think that Saylor and others who are predicting $10 million plus are unreasonable?
No, I think you're not going to get it within 10 years.
No,
right?
no.
So what I'm saying, look, I actually do think you're going to get 100x from here in Bitcoin.
Me too. Okay, good.
Over 20
same page. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's going to take until 2045 to get that, right? So it's just there's a certain pace to these things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so roughly speaking, I think that you will get very high confidence. You will get Bitcoin 1 million by 2035.
Yeah.
Some chance that you will get Bitcoin 1 million, at least a blip. It'll at least touch it in 5 years. Okay, so we could see it in 5 years, and Tom Lee would agree with that. You know what I mean? Like, it's possible. It's not even. It's I would say almost probable, like a 50% probability. 50-50, we're going to see it in 5 years. Okay, but the trend will still, the power law trend is only goes up to about 550,000, 600,000 in even in 10 years. It's not. Sorry, in 5 years, it's by 2030, it's only 500,000. So if we do get it, it's probably on the high side, kind of the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get it, we'll see it, but it may not be sustainable in 5 years, right? In 10 years, I think I think in 10 years, it'll actually be the floor. A million will be the floor in 10 years. And then I think what people say, what after then? I say, well, it's the first step. After that, we go to 10 million. But the 10 million, the way the power law works, it takes twice as much time. If going up 2x, after the next one, it takes 4x as much time. So it really slows down noticeably. So really the great CAGRs, the great returns that we're going to see are in the next decade.
Yeah.
Then it's going to slow down, and Bitcoin will be a less grayed out. So right now, I think if you're thinking about investing, I think right now is the time. Right, the next 10 years are going to be the golden era of Bitcoin. I think Saylor also kind of came to sort of the same conclusion as saying, And by the way, I've talked to Saylor about the power law, and he was very interested, So he's a genius. He's leveraged it up brilliantly. But I think at the end of the day, all models kind of converge to the power law.
Yeah.
They're all saying the same thing, but the mathematical statement of what it is the power law. That's the statistical. And all of us who follow the power law, we all agree on the numbers, more or less. We all agree on the bands, the probability, all this stuff.
Do you think about Bitcoin's adoption on a fundamental basis as much as you do from a mathematical perspective? I mean, do you think about what's going to cause or allow this kind of continued adoption and price bidding?
Right. So that's part of the power law of addresses. Right. So, it's very important to look at what does adoption mean for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Adoption does not mean volume of Bitcoin transactions.
No.
Right. Because I'm pretty much as hardcore Bitcoiner as you can get. And I do not zing around Bitcoin a lot.
Right. Okay. Same. Yeah.
Right. Right. So we're the same. Right. But I think Bitcoin is a savings vehicle. So you don't measure its adoption by, you don't measure it by trading volume. Right. That would not be a good way, a transaction volume. That's not a good way to measure Bitcoin. The way you measure adoption of Bitcoin is number of accounts that have 1 million sats. That's a pretty good metric, right? And if you want, I could even show you what that number looks like. So if you look here, okay, I just looked at all addresses that have at least 1 million sats in them, 0.01 Bitcoin, okay? And what I've done is I have done simple linear regression. First of all, I took the log of that number of addresses, and I regressed it against the log of time since the Genesis block in years. Do you see how the fit is just unbelievable?
Perfect. Yeah,
it's a perfect fit, right? Like, there's no way you can't say that thing is not going up. Like, where is this going to go up over the next 10 years? Well, this is like saying the U.S. population growth is 3%. Where is it going to go in the next 10 years? Well, it's going to be 35% bigger. You know what I mean? It's literally that simple, right? So Bitcoin is growing exactly like a virus, sort of it's sort of taking over the world like a virus. If you page down here, yeah, that's the number of whole coin that people have one Bitcoin. Again, a power law, So I'm going to show you a few other power laws like that.
I think it's really interesting that I ask you this question about adoption, and in my mind, where I was going was, sovereigns and institutions and global ETFs. But I think that I wanted to get your perspective on. But to me, it just kind of seems obvious that this is a better version of gold. Of course, countries and everything are going to treat it like gold, and that's what everyone sees, and that's why we have adoption. But I think that the path that you went down of actually showing real adoption amongst users is probably just as important, but often overlooked because, if we just had all bit,
right, like we can quantify it. We can say, statistically, this is an adoption. This is what adoption looks like statistically.
Yeah.
So we can sort of say, okay, how many people have, like, for example, in this addresses, okay, if you go to the number of people who have Bitcoin, there are 12 million people right now who have more than 12 million addresses on chain that have more than 1 million sats. 12 million. That's the number. That's from Glassnode, not debatable. That's the on-chain data. Okay. There's about 100 million people who have Bitcoin, period, on chain. But these numbers are growing exactly like this power law, right? So, and it's really interesting that Bitcoin price is also, let me find you the one. So this is just the Bitcoin price now, right? And I've taken the Bitcoin price since the Genesis block, since October of 2010, when it really started trading, that we can really get the prices correctly. As you can see, the red line is the trend line. Again, it's a line, We have all this volatility in Bitcoin, but in log space, it's not really that volatile. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just, we don't tend to look at things in log space. When Bitcoin goes down 70%, we're like, oh my God, the world's ending.
Yeah.
But in log space, it's not ending at all, right? We're just cruising. And what I drew is a yellow line, arbitrarily just shifted that thing by 0.6 in log space, okay? Which basically says I'm about to go, it's like a quadruple of the trend line. So basically, is the log 10 to the power 0.6 is equal to 4, right? So if I quadruple the trend line, that's really where the peaks tend to be, right? If I half the trend line, that's kind of that tends to be where the floor is, right? So in all prior cycles, we kind of quadrupled the trend line, right? So if we quadruple the trend line and we peak at the end of this year, and it's a contingent on and we peak in the end of this year, not continue going on year.
We'll get into that,
right? Yeah. I would expect 290,000 this year.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? That would be like, now if we don't quite peak this year, if we continue on into next year, then I think the peak is going to be even higher, right? Right. So, and it could even be, if you scroll down, that's sort of my base case. I think you could even go even crazier, right? Like, so we could go up to 500,000 this year. This year, even this year, even the next 6 months. Not unheard of, right? Not statistically, it makes sense, right? It still could make sense. I do think if we get a extended cycle into 2026 or even beyond, right, we could see much higher prices, even 500, 600, 700,000. I don't think we're going to hit 1 million, without a major correction in between. But I do think we could get significantly higher than where we are now, very significantly higher. So, I absolutely not a seller of Bitcoin at these prices. I do think as you kind of get to the, above 200, it if you did want to sort of trade around the edges, that's the price where you could start peeling a little bit off, right?
Okay.
And then as you get to 300,000, you peel more off, right? And you can do this with this thing called the Kelly criterion, which is just saying rebalancing at a certain percentage of your portfolio. So like if you say, okay, I want to be 70% of my portfolio in Bitcoin, right? Now Bitcoin goes up, you're now at 80%. You say, okay, I'll rebalance down to 70%, you know? And if you do the rebalancing periodically over time, like, 1 year, that's a pretty sound technique mathematically. There's all kinds of reasons why that's good. And then when Bitcoin drops, at the next bear market, you will buy it lower, and you can buy it lower, buying it up to 70% again, of your portfolio.
So do you think that, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on potential market extension, what kind of correction we may have in Bitcoin price compared to the dollar, if and
Sure.
when we do see that?
So I think that the 4-year cycle per se is dead, right?
Okay.
I'm not even sure it ever really existed, other than just being like an anomaly of, just, we don't have a lot of data points, right? So the first drop was in 2011, and Bitcoin was barely even moving then, so
Right.
you can't really, it wasn't related to anything. It was just a fluke. The next drop, 2013, might have been involved, it was really due to overextension with Mt. Gox, really, right? It's like the drops are not really connected to halvings, right? In my opinion, right? So I think the idea that the halvings contribute to the rallies and then we get completely overextended and then we automatically drop like clockwork, I don't think is going to apply going forward. So I don't believe in the 4-year cycle at all. I do think that we're not immune from bear markets. I think we will have another really nasty bear market. I just don't think we're having it now. I don't think it's happening in the next 12 months, honestly. I think we're going to have a very good, very positive 2025 and a very positive 2026, I think.
What kind of indicators are you looking for you to? Are you looking at indicators, or are you just trying to do I forget what you called it, Mary or Molly or whatever her name is, this rebalancing at
Kelly?
70%? Kelly?
It's a male guy. His name is Kelly.
Okay.
He was an engineer at Bell Labs. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Kelly's method, is that how you're kind of planning on coming in and out of the market? Because that actually kind of makes a lot of sense.
It's kind of, I've been meaning to do it. I just haven't sold any Bitcoin.
I haven't either. But
I'm starting to look. I do intend to basically start saying, at the end of 2025, to say, okay, I'm going to pick a number at what should Fred be involved? What would be a good maximum number to be involved in? And Kelly suggests a number, by the way. It suggests 70%. That's kind of the number it would mathematically suggest. There's a whole bunch of math around this, and there's all kinds of properties of this, right? So it's not just pulled, there's a reason. There's a reason for this, right? And it could be, right now the number is 75%, 75%. That's kind of based on the returns of Bitcoin. That's what the Kelly formula tells you that it should be, right? So I'm going to look at the end of 2025, and if I have more than 75% of my net worth in Bitcoin, right, which I kind of have now, so unless if Bitcoin goes up, I'm going to definitely have more than 75% of my net worth in Bitcoin, right? Of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin, right? So I will then recalibrate just down to 75. And then I will wait until the end of 2026, and then I will recalibrate in the end of 2026 to Bitcoin.
And what happens what happens if in Q2 of 2026, we just have a massive correction? Are you just okay with that? You didn't maybe time the top and get to rebuy the bottom like you wanted to, and like, is there
Yeah,
any
so the
other way?
current criterion does not the best way to you have sort of timed rebalancing, right? There's not, the math is a little, you're applying something that wasn't really meant exactly for this, but a lot of people have, right? So, do it once a year is probably just as good as doing it inter a year. You don't need to trade a lot. Like great traders, the great investors do not trade a lot. Warren Buffett does not trade a lot. He hates Bitcoin, but he is the greatest investor of all times. And he didn't get there by trading a lot. He got there by holding Geico and the Washington Post and, these things forever and writing them up. Yeah. So I don't think that there's a lot of reason to trade a lot. So I think, having a rule that, you wait until a year from now and then you see where you are and, and these, if we do start dipping, right, probably going to last a year. That's the other thing, right? So you don't need to be in too much of a hurry to catch the dip, in my opinion. Right. So again, this is the way I'm looking. I'm much more looking a little bit because I'm a little older, but also I'm much more of an asset allocator right now than I am a trader. So I'm looking at this saying, okay, yeah, I mean, if I have 70% and the market's dropping, I'm fine. I'm okay. I want to hold it 70%. I don't want to be like Arthur Hayes and just go to shorting Bitcoin. I'm not interested in that, right? No. I want to resist absolutely the urge to try to predict the market on the way down. I don't want to do that. Because the power law tells me that it's getting to 1 million. So if I really believe it's getting to 1 million, I could just hodl right through it. On the other hand, psychologically, that's really tough. And taking some off at the top could, look, I didn't have too much trouble holding my Bitcoin during the 22 debacle. Yeah, it didn't really phase me that much. I think this one will probably be, the next one will probably be less than that. So, I have such conviction in the asset right now that, I don't understand people. Well, I do understand them, but I think that people who trade Bitcoin a lot, they need to study Bitcoin more, Yeah. I just think that that's the thing. Some of these other things, you don't have that same kind of, some of these other things could just get wrecked, Do you have any words of advice? Because I want to know if there's anything relevant for, the shrimps, the minnows, your conviction, it makes perfect. Like all my other friends who are very wealthy, they just typically put all their money in Bitcoin and like 10x for them is perfect, right? Like, I think it's actually easier for the shrimps. Okay. Because here's the thing. I think most wealthy guys, well, first of all, most of them are not invested in Bitcoin, right? Because most people over the age of 50, they do not trust reallocating the money that they made by selling their business or, whatever.
Yeah.
They're not about to go putting something in some new thing. You know what I mean? It's, it's hard. It's hard because once you look, I've sold 10 businesses for $500 million. Took me over 20 years to do that. It was
fast. That's really fast.
Well, I mean, yeah, I did a lot. I sold 10 businesses in 20 years.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
But,
congratulations.
But like what I'm saying is like, that money was hard won, right?
Yeah.
And I would not have gotten mega into Bitcoin if I just I wasn't lucky enough to get orange pilled by Tom Lee in 2019. So I was at a conference in Bermuda and he was the guest speaker and I hung out with him And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, Bitcoin's at 5,000. I was like, Tom, where do you think it's going? And he's like, Fred, a million. And I'm like, 5,000, a million? Like what? How explain that? Like I got all day,
Yeah.
explain me why this thing's going to a million. And, he gave me sort of this argument of demographics and millennials, and they're going to inherit the world. And, this is an asset for millennials. And for whatever reason, that resonated for me,
Yeah.
So,
So
I put,
going back to the kind of advice for shrimps and minnows,
yeah,
who maybe only have, 5, 10,000, because what they're looking for, and they get caught in this trap, and it's so hard for anyone to really successfully, parlay some meme coin trades into a successful exit that then allows them to buy the Bitcoin dip and the bear cycle. And like that's a really exceptional type of behavior to do that. So they usually end up, because the hope and dream of 1,000x or 100x from a meme coin play or a low cap alt is something that people see their friends post on X from time to time.
I mean, people have this dream that they're going to make more than 10x trading over 10 years. They don't. They don't do it. Day traders do not make money. You meet people who have money. How do they get their money? Whether it's day trading penny stocks or day trading memes coins, you don't meet a lot of them who are like, see, I bought this, $10 million house, and how did you get it? Meme coins. I've not yet met a person like that. Now, I'm sure there's a few out there,
Right.
There are a few out there, and they love to show off their houses that they bought by, trading Shiba Inu. But, 99.9% of the people will not be successful in that thing. So I think you got to scale back your expectations.
Yeah.
If you're a stock market investor, you're lucky to make 10% a year.
Right.
That means that's kind of it. So you double, you triple your money in 10 years. That's a good thing. Bitcoin's going to do a lot better. It's going to 10x your money. Unfortunately, that's about your best bet, unfortunately. So you got to kind of scale back your expectations. Sure, it'd be nice if there was a great way to make 100x in 5 years. No, you're probably not going to do it. Statistically, you're not going to do it. Now, everybody who goes to Vegas thinks they're going to walk away a winner, or at least some of them do. But, the house knows the odds, and you're not going to do it. In fact,
Right.
You're going to lose most of the time. So I just think it's not realistic to think that you're going to beat Bitcoin long term, and the charts and the results show it. It's very hard. Now, if you got some angle, it's like you're making the meme coin and something, you got some angle, then great. Then you might be able to actually do it. You know what I mean? But if you're just like everybody else buying the thing, I don't know. It's it's pretty tough. And now on the other hand, Bitcoin's probably not going to save you either. You know what I mean? Like what I would suggest is don't focus too much on taking your $10,000 and trying to become a multimillionaire out of that, because it's probably not going to happen. Try to get a job, try to figure out how to make some money, and then take that money and buy a meaningful Bitcoin position. That's kind of what I would say. Like your problem right now is not that Bitcoin's not good enough for you. Your problem is you don't have enough money to make it work.
Right.
Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin is not useful for the guy who's got $5,000. It really isn't. I mean, it's marginally useful, but it's really useful for the guy who's got $100,000, right? The guy who's got $500,000, the guy's got $1 million, right? Then Bitcoin becomes really interesting and really important. And I think that's really who I'm talking to when I'm talking to Bitcoiners. I'm like, you got to have some investment that's reasonable, and you got to be thinking, wow, if I 10x that number, that's going to meaningfully change my life, right?
Right.
And look, I'm sure right now it's like Kyle, you've done well and everything, but like if you could take 10x what you have right now, is that enough? Maybe it's enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, it's enough.
Like maybe that's it. Maybe then you sort of switch gears and you're kind of doing other stuff. You might be putting it in, yield bearing stable coins or something. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of maybe not just going for the fences at some level, right? So I don't know. I think your investor profile changes as you get kind of as you get older, but also as you get wealthier. I think you don't have the same desires.
Do you think that I kind of touched on it earlier, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think that Bitcoin will become like the dominant world reserve currency or world reserve? I don't want to say currency necessarily, although I kind of feel like it is. Like, what else are you going to go denominate your Coca-Colas out around the world?
Here's the problem, Kyle. The problem is, unfortunately, I don't. And the reason I don't is this. And I really sad to say it because I would really hope it would, right? The problem is it will take probably 30 years, 30 or 40 years for it to happen. So it will in 30 or 40 years, right? And the problem is the fiat world is just too big.
Yeah.
Right. It's too big. There's too much fiat. There's too much institutions that are built on. The world is built on fiat right now, right? So, yeah, in 40 years, look, I'm not going to be alive in 40 years. You know what I mean? So, I got an 18-year-old. He'll see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to personally see it, right? I'm not going to be around to witness that. I think in his lifetime, people will be using sats, not dollars. You know what I mean? I just think it's, I do spend a lot of time thinking about when you make a statement like that, are we talking in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I think eventually you'll be right. I think there's almost zero chance that the dollar and major currencies cease to exist in the next 20 years. I don't think that. Now, on the other hand, and so where is Bitcoin for that period? Well, I think Bitcoin up until then is kind of a sailor puts it, digital property, right? It's sort of like it's this great asset that's transferable at will. You can move it around. You can borrow against it very easily, and you can live off your Bitcoin, no problem.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's not going to be money though. It's going to be not yet. So we're in this hybrid world for a little bit more time, for quite a bit more time. And I really think we just kind of got to accept that's probably going to be the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
So,
all right, Fred, that's going to wrap it up today. Thank you so much.
Kyle, is great. Thanks a lot for having me on.